we should go with some of your guys's darker and more outlandish ideas. I love Sleepy Toasts. I can't leave that behind.
I really liked the phrase chocolate high school. Uh, Welcome to Please Make This Movie, a show where we take a beloved movie or TV series and create the perfect sequel, prequel, or spinoff. I'm Zach.
I'm Storm.
I'm Nick.
As always, you can follow us on Twitter at PMTMPod. There you can see suggestions for future episodes, any artwork that we've made. Nick has been pretty fire with the movie posters. And you can also vote on any polls we have. And to really make this topical and lock it into the time frame, something mail-in ballots. Yeah, that's great. This
week on our Twitter polls, we're taking mail-in ballots. The due date is December 1st, but we will be accepting them at least a week afterwards. Just make sure you sign correctly.
Yes, and Sharpie will be allowed, but they may be dropped from helicopter. I don't know that conspiracy. All right, so this week we're talking Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, not Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. We are pretending that movie does not exist because it does give away some of the lore behind Willy Wonka. So we're going straight up prequel to Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory.
And also, that movie just sucks.
Johnny Depp is super problematic, and so we're just going to act like he doesn't exist.
Well,
I will say...
Yeah, my movie might be a little problematic. Sorry, Storm. But
Oh, no.
I mean, you got Oompa Loompas in there. It's kind of hard to avoid them.
I see. I think I figured out a loophole to avoid that. But I was going to say, with the Johnny Depp, Tim Burton movie, as terrible as it is, the background stuff, the lore, is substantiated by the original Charlie and the Chocolate Factory novel. So I used some of that for research, and I noticed that they reference some of the events directly.
So also in my research that was basically just saying on Twitter, hey, what's a messed up thing about Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory that I don't know? Someone told me that there is a unpublished chapter where I believe it's called the Vanilla Fudge Room.
What?
Yeah, where two kids, against Willy Wonka's orders, start climbing up a giant mountain of vanilla fudge, fall into this wagon that takes them into the next room, which is the flattening and cutting room, and they are promptly squished and chopped up into pieces.
Oh my God.
Yeah, so there is more child death in the book, or there was going to be.
I think that the rest of the kids survive, so that would have been the only instance of actual death.
I don't know that they survive, and I think that's the question we need to answer right from the top.
Yeah, so in the movie, it is left ambiguous. In the book, I remember I read this book as a child, and I remember they come back at the end. You see them again, but they're physically impacted by the recovery methods they've used to solve the ailments that they received in the factory. Like Mike TV, he was really small, so he's been stretched out. And Veruca, I think it's still the same color, but she's been juiced. Or not Veruca, Violet.
Violet, yeah, the blueberry.
Veruca just sucks.
Yeah.
She's just a piece of shit.
I don't remember what happened to her in the book, 'cause I read that a long time ago, but I do recall the descriptions of them being all...
I never read the book, so weird. I am going solely off the movie.
I think I inadvertently took some things from either the book or the shitty movie, but I have reasons why I did that. I'm excited.
All right, so does somebody want to really quickly run us through a summary of Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory?
It's about Charlie's a young child from poor means who finds out about Willy Wonka's contest. Willy Wonka is a chocolatier that exists in his world, who's kind of this mythical figure. And this contest, he's got his closed factory. Nobody knows how he gets this chocolate out, who's making it, who's helping him. But they're going to let 5 kids in. They're going to put golden tickets into Wonka bars and send them out worldwide. And a bunch of kids find them. We see a bunch of wacky antics that ensue, different scenarios of people trying to find the tickets. Then 5 kids find them. Charlie is luckily one of them. And he goes into the factory. A bunch of crazy stuff happens to each of the kids one by one. They're kind of taken out of the scenarios in scenarios that line up with their own personalities. The flaws in their personalities lead to them being taken out in specific ways. And Charlie wins this competition. He wins over Willy Wonka's heart, and he gets to take over the factory.
Nice. Storm, you should be our summary guy because your memory is way better than mine.
So I was just going off the cuff on that one.
That
Questions.
was good.
So I have some things that maybe I made connections to that weren't there. Maybe I was just trying to punch up the story a little bit. The character Slugworth, right? The evil, the antagonist, the guy with the big ass scar on his face who whispers in all the kids' ears. He tells them he's trying to get the recipe to the everlasting gobstopper. Is Slugworth working for Willy Wonka? Is he like the he's kind of laying this trap?
Yeah.
And then in the end, when Charlie turns that in, that is proof that he can't be bought or he is like pure or whatever.
Yeah. I thought that was fairly. Sorry.
I thought that was obvious, but I wasn't 100% sure. And then my other thing is the Candyman at the beginning with the shop. Does he purposely give Charlie a ticket?
Oh.
Bill's Candy Shop?
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, to me, I like the theory that all of the kids specifically got their tickets. I mean, obviously, it's a fantastical movie, but Slugworth's waiting for Charlie in an alley. Like, how the hell does he know that he got the damn ticket and he's just waiting in the alley? Like, I don't know. It seems like
So you think all the kids are chosen?
I like that theory. I know it's just a kids movie, so it doesn't really matter. But I think it's fun.
I think that's fun too. Yeah, like Wonka's got this surveillance network, like kind of like his own intelligence community.
Yeah,
I do really, I really do like the idea of a Slugworth, even beyond, even outside of the idea of him working for Willy Wonka. Still, these other high level chocolatiers that are trying to infiltrate or steal his secrets. In fact, that definitely plays into my pitch a little bit. So even with that reveal, I love that thread throughout, that kind of espionage thing. Did you guys know that Roald Dahl, despite we did learn some terrible news about Roald Dahl's personal history this week, but in addition to that, he was a spy in World War II.
Yeah,
Really?
I did find that also, that he was a spy, and didn't it lead to like problems with his wife?
I believe so.
Something along those lines.
Yeah. So, he definitely, if you look this up, the things that will come up say that he was like a James Bond-esque kind of romantic spy. He would woo women for information. And
what?
but then later in life, so he, after they made, I believe, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, he didn't want to sell the rights to any of his other books because they deviated so far from the plot. And when he passed the rights, they went to his wife, and she immediately sold the rights to all of the books.
Nice.
So there was obviously some bad blood there.
So you hinted at it earlier. I think we just need to really get out in front of it. Roald Dahl, kind of a bad dude. Said some pretty despicable things about many, many different groups of people. I think the most explicit thing I found this week was him more or less saying that like Hitler maybe had his reasons. And that's not something you want out of your children's authors. So yeah,
I'm surprised that isn't more common knowledge. I had never heard that before, but I mean, reading that quote, there's really no other way to interpret that.
I feel like sorry.
I think it's similar to like the Dr. Seuss propaganda type thing. So I don't know if you guys know this. Dr. Seuss was big into creating World War II propaganda for the Americans.
Yeah.
And that led to some awful depictions of other people. Um,
Oh,
and so like I think it's just like we don't want our children's authors to be sullied, so we just like push it to the side and ignorance is bliss type thing.
yeah, that makes sense. I don't know how frequently Roald Dahl was like appearing before the press to
Yeah.
drum up news for his books or anything like that. So maybe it is like a Dr. Seuss scenario. Because again, yeah, Dr. Seuss is another one that I don't know that I've ever seen. Dr. Seuss, I don't know what he looks like. Um, so where it's easy to kind of sweep that stuff under the rug when it's just a name
Yeah,
associated
and
with a
then
piece of
J.K.
children's
Rowling,
art.
I feel like there is definitely a theme with children's authors just being real pieces of shit. Because J.K.
Yeah,
Rowling and her whole transphobia, like we could have a whole episode
I
about
mean,
terrible, terrible children's authors.
yeah, J.K. Rowling, I think, is a little bit overblown. But
Yeah,
I mean, there's one thing about her weird argument, and then I'll like literally like being anti-Semitic.
yeah,
I think
and
they're
yeah, being
wrong.
anti-Semitic and having no black characters in the entire series, save like one character.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I mean, I'm fine with it. Not like I'm like, oh, I'm happy Roald Dahl was anti-Semitic, but I'm like, I don't know. Once like I figured out Walt Disney, you know, was anti-Semitic, I just assumed all really good children's authors and creators of children's media were anti-Semitic, and it's just kind of
yeah.
what comes with the bag, like.
yeah. I also think that given the separation between the movie and the book itself, learning that fact doesn't necessarily affect my enjoyment of Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory at all.
No, 100. I do not think the movie I think stands alone on its own, as its own thing.
Oh yeah,
So let's talk about some of the things that we feel like need to make their way into a prequel.
yeah.
What is the yeah?
Uh,
Go ahead.
this was a tough one because I think. Well, obviously, I would say Willy Wonka, the man, in some capacity, should be in it, or it should follow him, his life, his tale, this chocolate. But I don't know if that's necessarily true. So I'm interested to hear what you guys think about. I think Oompa Loompas and Willy Wonka are the only two I could come up with for sure. Maybe music.
I would agree on the music. I think the we're not going to sit down and write music for it. I'm assuming
Yeah.
no one created a song this week.
No.
Um, but yeah, I think the music, or at least the rhyming, as a functioning as almost like a chorus. If you guys are
Yeah.
familiar, this
Yeah.
is super English major, like the Greek plays where like the chorus explains what's going on. Like that's what the Oompa
Hmm.
Loompas are doing in this
Totally.
play, more or less, or in this movie, more or less.
Well, for this one, I don't want to suggest things that should be required, and it's harder for prequels than there are sequels. I
Yeah,
feel
I
like,
agree.
because honestly, mine is like, I don't know, it like goes against everything the first movie was. Like,
I
I mean, and that was 100% intentional. So I don't want to be like, oh, well, we have to
Interesting.
have fun, silly, edible candies. It's like, no, no, I don't.
I
Mine's
feel
going
like
off the rails.
Willy Wonka has an essence, um, and I don't necessarily think we have to include that essence, but we have to give the steps to where a progression to it makes sense. Um, because if we have just this normal buttoned up guy as Willy Wonka, and then in Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, he is purple suit jacket, fake pass out into somersault, saying super insane shit to kids. Um, like that's just a 0 to 100 type thing. So we need to
Uh-huh.
have at least some sort of like maybe
Yeah.
hints at how he became this eccentric.
Yeah, just I
Totally.
mean, a development of what is Willy Wonka in the movie. I mean, yeah, just something that at least explains and leads up to something going on in the movie, broadly speaking.
Yeah. So you
I kind
guys,
of go ahead.
sorry, I was just say so you guys don't think that like there being songs or like Oompa Loompas or even like the Chocolate Factory are requirements necessarily.
Only because I don't think the movie I have will
Oh,
make
okay.
that fitting at all. I mean,
Okay.
I think they're there, but I mean, you'll see, you'll see. I mean,
Okay.
I because I mean, I'm making a prequel that is not made for children
Oh, okay.
at all.
All right,
I
so it's
think it
kind of is
greatly depends on when you're setting your prequel also,
Yeah, like
because if it is very close to the events of Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, then I feel like the factory and some of the weird technology and the Oompa Loompas need to be explained. If you're setting it as like a Willy Wonka childhood story, I don't think those things are as important.
yeah, I mean, I technically have songs and I technically have Oompa Loompas. They're just not. I mean, yeah, I think it's best if we don't really like have too many requirements for this one. I mean, this is a weird movie to
yeah,
kind of get through an overview.
Yeah, I think we should get into our pitches before we
Yeah,
really start to give anything away.
but before I
Uh,
do that, I wanted to comment. I actually didn't realize, I'm going to say clever in quotes, how clever this movie was.
okay.
Because I was probably just dumb when I watched it all the previous times. But like, I don't know, there's a lot of like everything that Willy Wonka says is like a pun or something
Yeah.
goofy.
Or a
Like,
little bit of like philosophical wisdom.
oh yeah, morals. Yeah, but philosophical wisdom, like a moral. I mean, all the songs that Oompa Loompa sings are like
Mm,
moral advice for
yeah.
kids. But like specifically in the gobstopper room, like he's throwing like random items in like vats of like potions that like are somehow making the gobstoppers. And they're like, why'd you throw a pair of shoes in there? It's like, oh, it could use a little kick. And I never got that. Like I never got that before. Like, oh, it's a shoes and shoes kick. And then
Mm.
like he puts his hand in there and like someone's like, oh, is it too hot? And he's like, no, much too cold. And then he throws a winter jacket. And I was like, I never got that. Like, oh shit,
Yeah.
that's kind of cool.
Yeah.
yeah, I think Gene Wilder is going to Willy Wonka is going to be hard to cast because I think Gene Wilder did such a like spot on job, or at least like what I imagine is a spot on job of writing the line between insane and genius.
It's just terribly believable. Like he fits
Yeah.
into the world that's created in the movie so well that you don't question it the second he shows up. It's his show for the whole thing.
Hmm.
Um, I love this movie. I watched it a whole lot as a kid. I had a VHS of it that we just watched over and over again. So this was an exciting one for me, and I agree that recasting Gene Wilder is tough, and I think that's a huge part of the reason the Tim Burton one is so bad. And any other Willy Wonka projects that have come up over the years have kind of not panned out because how do you recapture that? You have to have that kind of perfect guy. Um,
Yeah. I went through the person I chose to cast is just like you need. I don't know. You can't replicate Gene Wilder. You just need someone who's going to bring their own unique style that's going to be successful. That's the way
uh,
I looked at it.
I went at it from the kind of the opposite approach, but I dig it because we're going to have wildly different casting choices.
I
So
actually didn't cast anybody because my original idea wasn't going to be fun to cast for me. And then when I changed my idea, I just didn't have time to go through and cast anybody. So I have some like vague like reaches for people, but nothing that I've really spent time coming up with. So let's get into pitches. Since I teased mine a little bit, um, I originally had this idea of looking at Willy Wonka as a child and a group of children, very similar, like a very similar story to what we get in Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. Um, Basically, I had this proprietor of a chocolate factory, Leonard Loompa, who was the owner and proprietor of Loompa Land Chocolate. And he is in the process of creating. So we find this out later in the movie. He's in the process of finding, like, genetically engineering workers to run his factory. And we have a much less um, fantastical version of the Wonka chocolate factory. I almost would imagine it as more of like a steampunk or even like a very clinical, clean, um, very similar to the Tim Burton, where it is just not nearly as fun. Chocolate Factory, and this guy. So that is how the Oompa Loompas came to be. Willy Wonka ultimately is going to win a similar contest that he poses, and he is going to take the Oompa Loompas, named after their creator Leonard Loompa, and they're going to be working in his factory, and he will have created this whole fake backstory for them, to hide the like terrible creation story of them. So basically, my children were going to be Arthur Slugworth, which is Slugworth. We're going to find out how he gets that scar. Willy Wonka, who's going to inherit the factory. He's going to win. He truly loves candy at the beginning of this movie. But by the time we see him in Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, he's basically a broken man who has spent his entire life creating this thing that he once loved and is no longer fun for him, and that's why he's selling the factory. Chucky Bucket, who is going to be so this is where my idea fell apart, because I was going to have a Charles or Chuck Bucket, which was going to be Charlie's late father, but then I realized he has a child. He's probably not going to have a son. Um, and so I'm just going to push everything back to them being like college age chocolatiers in training. And maybe that's how Charlie came to be so poor, as his father died before he was even born, and left his mother as a single mother, raising this. And his father also went in with Grandpa Joe, and Grandpa Joe witnessed everything that happened, and the loss of um, I don't know if his dad, like the loss of his son. Um, and that's kind of why Grandpa Joe has been bedridden. It is not for physical reasons, it is for mental reasons. He has like PTSD basically. And then I created some other characters, basically to fill out the seven deadly sins that were going to be happening as these children were punished. Actually, Willy Wonka was going to be one that was supposed to be punished. He was going to be suffering from pride, because he was so confident in his abilities as a chemist. And Chuck Bucket, Charles Bucket, Charlie's father, was going to be the one that was pure, the one that should have won. And Willy Wonka was basically going to do something to sabotage him, win the contest, and all of this with picking Charlie is basically his making amends for what he's done in his past.
All right.
Nice.
So when you mentioned like they're genetically creating workers, is that where the Oompa Loompas come from?
Yes, the Oompa
Okay.
Loompas are genetically engineered, like not necessarily clones. They're made to be small, for purposes of smaller hands fitting into tiny machines, and just being better with smaller tools. I did write some themes down that I think I would like to carry over into my movie. Basically, that sugar is an addiction, that capitalism is bad, the seven deadly sins.
Whoa, hold on. That's a revolutionary theme you got there.
Capitalism is bad. That's like the theme of Willy Wonka.
I don't know
Every
about that.
person, every person that comes from money in this movie gets severely punished.
No, the theme of the original Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory movie is that gambling pays off.
No,
If you spend all of your money on chocolate bars, on that 50-cent coin you found on the ground, instead of feeding your crippled elderly people at home, you will get a lifetime supply of candy.
all right. So let me finish my pitch here. Speaking of crippled elderly people at home, this is also needs to take place in like a dystopian Europe, kind of like a Handmaid's Tale type thing. Because I don't know if you guys noticed the names, but we have Grandpa Joe and Grandma Josephine and Grandpa George and Grandma Georgina. So we have like a Fred and Offred type thing going on here. And so yeah, it's very dark, the time they're living in, but sugar's going to get them through it.
Oh man. I really like the idea of the Oompa Loompas being from a factory called Loompa Land, because it still tracks with the idea of him saving the Oompa Loompas from Loompa Land. But in this case, he's saving them from that factory.
Are snozwanglers tax collectors or something?
Yeah, vicious canids.
Vicious canids, those are my favorites.
Basically, I was just gonna have those be like random machines that existed, and we'll see like Oompa Loompas being um, sucked up in them. And the Oompa Loompas in mine are not singing. They're called Oompa Loompas because the only thing they can really say is like Oompa.
Oh man.
Yeah,
So
it's super depressing.
so the overall tone is much darker than the tone of
Yeah, I want to set a
original.
very Eastern European uh, like vibe for this movie.
A
Like
lot of Adidas tracksuits will be
yeah,
in the
yeah,
costume department.
very
Oh,
like very like Cold War. Uh,
wow.
yeah,
Well, that doesn't sound like a happy.
no, 100%, 100%.
I'm not one to talk, so
Yeah. Uh, well,
well, yeah. Do you have anything else to add?
No, I'm good. We
I
got it.
I'd like to go.
okay.
Okay, so I'm going to start off. I'm going to start off with a poem that inspired this, set in the movie. Up the airy mountain, down the rushing glen, we dare not go a hunting for fear of little men. That is said to Charlie as he's staring in the dark through Willy Wonka's gates as that weird creepy guy with the cart comes up. It's the first thing he
Yeah.
says. And I
Oh.
paused and I replayed. I'm like, what did you say?
Yeah.
And it was like, for fear of little men. I was like, what? I was like, oh, like maybe. And then I was like, maybe there's like this poem, this story that kind of goes around the town, like is up in the airy mountain, like and maybe there's like more of a poem to it. I didn't really play off of that, but that kind of set the tone. So we start off our movie with Willy Wonka, and this is before he shuts down his factory. So Willy Wonka, actually, a lot of people don't know this; it's kind of been suppressed over the years. But Willy Wonka once had a son, and we're gonna call him Wally Wonka because I don't know why not. I was thinking Billy Wonka, but I just didn't want to mix up the names while we were talking about it. So it's gonna be Wally Wonka. Wally Wonka has this crazy, wild imagination like his father, and they're very attached to each other. They have all sorts of fun. They laugh. They make up crazy stories, and they have a blast. Like we obviously want to show this in the movie, but unfortunately, there's a pandemic going on, similar to what's going on in our world right now, sweeping throughout this weird German village that they live in, because I don't think that anything else exists outside of Willy Wonka other than this nice German village. And it's this disease called sleepy-tosis. And sleepy-tosis pretty much makes you so sleepy that you are stuck in your bed for years and years at a time.
Oh, no.
If we go to our Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory movie, it was something Grandpa Joe and Charlie's grandparents were all suffering from, because Grandpa Joe was stuck in his bed for 20 years, only to get motivated to get out of bed by Charlie's golden ticket winning
And dance. And just straight up
and dance.
do a full on dance.
Yeah. So yeah, it got him out of sleepy-tosis. Unfortunately, they don't know much about this disease. People typically can live with it in Charlie's time, but it was just hitting Willy Wonka and his son, so people were actually dying from it. They go into comas and they just completely like sleep themselves to death. So, in order to help kind of heal his son and help him get him through this time, because he can't go out and play with other kids. It's super sad. So they make up this fantastical land called Oompa Loompa Land, where all these crazy things happen. Everything in Oompa Loompa Land you can eat. You can tear off the trees off barks, and it's chocolate. There's chocolate rivers. There's little teacups made out of like candy that you can drink sugar water out of, and it kind of gets Wally, his son, kind of through these rough times, and they make up these like nice moral songs that they sing about, and they make this song about imagination. And they kind of have all these like nice bonding moments as like Willie really loves his son. However, a doctor comes one day, and Billy is suffering from an intense coma and sleepy-tosis, and he just doesn't get up again. And the doctor's like, I don't know, Mr. Wonka. Your son might never wake up again. This is a very serious case of sleepytosis. And Willy Wonka, being a very skilled chemist, as he's like a very successful chocolatier, which I think actually connects to the books a little bit. I think he was actually a chemist, but I'm not 100% sure. He's like, he kind of like, it devastates him. It's a tragedy. So he's like going through like research papers. He's trying to study. He's trying to figure out like what sort of medicine can I create to kind of help my son. And he reads of this weird like alternative medicine article. I mean, he gets sort of real big rabbit hole of this boar tusk from Brazil that like has kind of had some weird like hocus pocus, for lack of a better word, medicinal properties, and a last ditch effort. Him and Mr. Wilkinson, the guy who plays Slugworth for all the kids in the movie, his real name, or his name that Wonka calls him at the end, is Mr. Wilkinson. They go to Brazil, and they hear that like, oh, there's only a specific area in this village where these boars are at, and they find this village, but this village is like filled with just like people with dwarfism, like little people. And I actually looked this up. There's actually like a village that has a crazy high amount of people with dwarfism in Brazil. That's kind of why I chose Brazil. And so like it's just like this very poor village filled with little people. And also in Brazil, a fun little thing, tech millionaires go to do is to take ayahuasca. So unbeknownst to Mr. Wonka, and I don't know what's going on with Wilkinson. Sorry, I just dropped some. So who knows what Mr. Wilkins is up to? I don't want him to take the ayahuasca, but they kind of trick Willy Wonka into taking ayahuasca, and he has this like multiple day long hallucinogenic trip in like the Brazilian, like the Amazon, where he. So here's my theory. Like he goes on this trip, and these people in the village are like messing with him. They're kind of torturing him. They're singing fun little songs in like Brazilian that he doesn't get, and he sees them like chopping a head off of a chicken. They see like they find like a corpse and like put a bunch of like snakes around it and kind of mess it up, and he's just kind of wandering aimlessly. I don't know. We can fill it in whatever that is. I don't know what the things are. But anyway, he has a horrible experience. And what I want to I'll get to that later, actually. So essentially, I don't know what's going to happen. I got to leave some open stuff in case we kind of choose this as our movie. But essentially, it's like a psychological thriller. It's mostly like a scary movie. I want this kind of Brazilian trip to be a big chunk of the movie. But what it leads up to, inevitably, is him being essentially burnt out on hallucinogenic drugs and ayahuasca from these villagers that have been drugging him. He makes like a deal with him. He's like, I'll hire you. You come work with me. Like I just shut down my factory to come here. I need new workers. You guys would be great. Like, I don't know, maybe make some sort of amends. I don't really know. Something has to happen where he brings these villagers back to his factory, where he pays them to dress like Oompa Loompas, put wigs on, paint their skin, and to recreate this entire fantasy land. Because what happens is one of like the climaxes of the movie is that Mr. Wilkinson finds him and tells him that his son has died of sleepytosis. And he goes into madness. And this is where Willie completely breaks. Very horrifying part of the movie, I want it to be. And then he goes back and he recreates Oompa Loompa Land. In all these like fun stories, he starts making these songs. He teaches them to these villagers, these Brazilian villagers, who now are his Oompa Loompas, who like 10 hours a day have to dress up and entertain him in this like hallucinogenic like representation of his world. He builds that boat tunnel that is like specifically supposed to replicate his experience through that tunnel, or through the Amazon forest, his trip on the ayahuasca. Because you see like images of like chickens' heads getting cut off, and he all the moral songs that he sung with his kid are songs that the Oompa Loompas sing to these kids as they go throughout the original movie. So long story short, the whole goal, eventually going back to the original movie, the whole goal for finding an heir to his business was one, not just because he didn't have any kids, but because his son died, and he wanted someone who could experience this fantastical world, um, and kind of almost replace him as his son.
Nice.
Oh
I was,
man.
I was worried about mine being too dark, and then
I went hard. I want it to be a horror movie. Like the
I-
last
my
shot I
goodness.
want is Wonka walking to the gate of kids in the original movie, but like this like low angle, and it's just his back, not his front, and then it's like him like rolling and falling, and then it cuts and it just says like Wonka.
Oh no. So okay, the factory as it exists in the original movie, from your pitch, is it's all a sham, a ruse that he has put on to try and live out this fantasy that he's developed after being burnt out on these drugs.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. It's completely like
Oh my
he recreates all this edible stuff. He talks about Oompa Loompa Land. Like there's like a real factory behind the scenes.
so
Okay.
that was my question: was he a chocolatier
Yeah.
before any of this,
Oh
or
yeah.
did he? Okay, I
No, so yeah.
also
Sorry, I
really
didn't.
like the idea of
I,
him being a
I
chemist whose son dies, and then he just starts making candy because of his dead son.
no,
Like
no.
that's super depressing, and I love it.
So he uses like people stealing his recipes as an excuse to go on this trip.
Okay. Right on.
It's like
Wow.
a cover story. So before this, his factory is very normal. Like, didn't Grandpa Joe say he worked at it once? Is that correct, or am I crazy?
That happened in the Tim Burton one, but I don't think he says that in the original.
Nah, never mind. So like that doesn't matter. But like it's just like a normal candy factory. But he like does a revamp after like the 10-year hiatus and just like goes balls to the wall.
My God, I got to tell you, I love that sleepy toasters. That is a
I
great
too.
idea. I was wondering what the heck was going to happen there, or how we were going to bring that around. I think that's perfect.
Yeah, because it's absolutely insane that they've just been laying in this bed for 20 years while they're all poor as hell. Like, I don't know, Grandpa, why don't you get a job? Like, clearly you can dance, but I don't know.
Yeah.
So my explanation for that, I never gave it, was basically that sugar became so important in their diets that it replaced, like they are so malnourished that basically by the time they got that old, they couldn't get out of bed,
Oh, man.
because like there's a comment made that they're having like cabbage water and bread, and they're like, oh, a real banquet, and it's not because like it's a lot of food, it's because it's just not candy for once.
Okay.
Because there's just not, to really get the Eastern European vibe of my movie, there's just not food readily available for them, so they eat candy as like their meals.
Oh my
having
God.
having lived in Eastern Europe, a lot of that rings true.
You guys went super dark with this. I did not at all. But I think
Okay.
I think there's still a way to combine the ideas, particularly because of the trip, or the physical idea of going on a journey. But I can go ahead and give you guys my pitch.
Yeah, go ahead.
So
Yeah.
I basically just looked up the background of Willy Wonka online, and then kind of developed that into an idea, because his backstory is out there. It was in the novel, but I like the idea of Willy Wonka being from an extremely low class background, not dissimilar from Charlie Bucket's own upbringing, similar family. And maybe there's a figure in his life that maybe does something to get money that is a little bit it's questionable. We don't know what it is, but it may be his father or his father figure. The way they get money seems to be some sort of criminal activity. But from a very early age, Willy Wonka shows an advanced knowledge of chocolate and chocolate development, like mass production of chocolate. So he is excelling right away, but he comes from this background. So he has to win sort of like contests and awards, and we see montages of him growing up. and going to like the highest culinary school possible, but focused on chocolate. So he's the king of the chocolate academy when he's a little kid. Then he's in the chocolate high school. He's the best there. And I like the idea of Wilkinson. Wilkinson being with him like the whole way. So maybe he has like a crew that grows up with him. I also like the idea of Slugworth having been a real person that is his professional rival, and he does exist in the world, and Wilkinson is pretending to be Slugworth, but Slugworth does actually exist.
Okay.
So in my pitch, there is the three characters we'll say are Wonka, Willy Wonka, Wilkinson, let's say Tom Wilkinson, and then Slugworth, Mr. Slugworth. So they all grow up together. They go to Chocolate University, and Willy Wonka said in his background that he has a PhD in scientific chocolatiering, and that he's been nominated for Nobel Prizes in these fields. So I think they graduate. They all start their separate companies. We've got Slugworth's Chocolates and Wonka's Chocolates, where Wilkinson works with him as his kind of second in charge. And Wonka's factory's blowing up. It's not only is it a better name, but he's got this sense of showmanship to it. But he starts getting bigger and bigger orders for kind of high class clients. One of which, and I think this was in the Tim Burton movie, but it tracks from the novel. It's a prince in I think India orders a giant castle out of to be made out of chocolate, and he can't get it delivered without it melting. So his reputation is damaged, and then he starts finding out that there's spies, people coming into his factory to steal his recipes, specifically spies being sent from Slugworth to figure out how he's it's like his mass production, his engineering of chocolate, and he's pushing the grounds. I have a theory that he might have been developing like weaponized chocolate in the movie, because they do make, he has exploding candy, and then he's talking about like sending people through, like teleporting people and stuff. So, but that's neither here nor there. But okay, so Willy Wonka finds out that there's spies in the factory, probably sent from Slugworth, so he closes it down. And him and Wilkinson go on a journey. He knows he needs to go on this journey. And I want at some point on the journey, I want them to encounter Grandpa Joe, just in like a transport, like on a boat or something, just kind of incidentally. And they don't know what's going on, but there's this Grandpa Joe cameo as a younger man. And eventually they make their way to an island. I think they go through the Bermuda Triangle. And they end up on an island that's like a desert island, kind of Mad Max-esque. And for some reason, Wonka knows, like, we got to go through there. And they go through the desert and they find this oasis. And it is implied through the technology and some of the stuff you see that the Oompa Loompa, this is the Oompa Loompas land, Loompa Land, that the Oompa Loompas are aliens that have crashed on this special island. And they have these advanced technologies that can push Wonka's chocolatiering even further. But they don't know how to interact with people without freaking everyone out, so they need this buffer. So a lot of the movie would be set in Loompa Land. It's Wonka interacting with them and figuring out their culture and convincing them to come work for him in the factory. And I think maybe there'd be some Slugworth angle, like maybe Slugworth is following him to Loompa Land. But some stuff I want to touch on is that the Oompa Loompas in their culture, they don't talk a lot. They don't talk directly, and they really don't talk in the movie, but they do whisper to him, so they can talk. But I think in their culture, they're really in touch with like social cues and learning, taking wisdom from things that happen around you, and everyone has to comment on it and acknowledge it, which is they express that in song. So the songs that they sing in the movie, that's like their way of just as a group acknowledging like, hey, what that person just did is bad, and we're all going to learn from it and never do it again. But other than that, they kind of, I get the feeling that the reason they don't talk in the original movie is because they are kind of an advanced civilization, and they're looking down on these snotty ass kids. But that's the basics. I don't know where it goes or how it ends, but he makes a truce with Oompa Loompas and he brings them back to the factory to work for him, and they should defeat Slugworth somehow. And that's it. But I feel like we'll be able to combine some of those ideas with a lot of these darker ideas you guys came up with.
Alrighty. Nice. Yours is definitely more realistic.
Well, I really did just kind of base it off of his real backstory. But I realized a lot of that is touched on in the Tim Burton one. So I think in the essence of keeping it original, we should go with some of your guys's darker and more outlandish ideas. I love Sleepy Toasts. I can't leave that behind.
I really liked the phrase "chocolate high school." Uh,
I mean, like Halloween Town High.
yeah, but it's only people who want to make candy, and so they like don't get fuck done. They're just always like, taste this. Oh, that tastes gross. Taste this. Uh,
Yeah, I
chocolate.
feel like it'd kind of be like you would just see that quickly, like in a sequence of montages. But it would be like Hogwarts, but for chocolate making kids.
In Zach's movie world, it would have a double meaning. It would be like chocolate high, like chocolate high school, but then it'd be like chocolate high, like yeah, like
Yeah.
Oh
Yes.
no.
Exactly.
where you learn how to get your sugar addiction.
Oh man. So
Uh,
Willy Wonka would have some guilt associated with being a chocolatier in that world.
I think there's definitely so. I maybe I'm reading way too much into the character of Willy Wonka, but I think there's definitely in the movie some guilt of like he has created candy that is so good that people are like it is wreaking havoc on the diets of children. Um, and couple that with the song at the very beginning from the Candyman that like he's straight up giving candy to kids and they're desperate for it. They just need the fix. Um,
I'm gonna argue against that because he literally has a competition where you have to buy as many Wonka bars as possible.
It's a
because he
genius move.
knows, yeah, he doesn't want like I don't have an explanation for that. Basically, that's how the capitalism comes in. There. um, so I don't know where we're going with this right now. I definitely like. I think we can take some of Storm's ideas about the Bermuda Triangle whole thing with the Oompa Loompas and the Oasis and tie that into the Brazilian villagers. And maybe instead of them being I do like the aliens idea.
It could be posing
Um,
as villagers, but then they turn
yeah,
out to be aliens.
yes.
And
Um,
if he is on an ayahuasca trip, you won't know if they're like DMT aliens or that have come from outer space or from another dimension, or if they're actually aliens because he's
yeah,
high.
I really like the idea of the ayahuasca trip because I feel like that is kind of what the whole movie is. Um,
I
like
mean,
that's
it's been said before, but it's a trippy ass movie.
Oh
like
yeah.
I mean, if you go to the Lagunitas Brewing company in Chicago, like their entranceway is like they play like a weird, slowed down, pure imagination song, and it's all like tie dye, bright colors. It's pretty cool. But yeah, and then there's like, of course, like I think there's already like re-edited YouTube trailers of like Willy Wonka as a horror movie.
Oh
yeah,
yeah.
that's it. Yeah, that's a very common thing. I also like the idea of just this extreme paranoia that Willy Wonka has because there's so many spies and like everybody could be a spy and yeah, like maybe that could even lead to like a falling out between him and Wilkinson because he accuses Wilkinson of possibly spying, and that could be our maybe like an emotional
What if
story that we have going on.
what if he scars him? He lashes out at Wilkinson, and that's how Wilkinson gets his scar.
All right, let's go back first to
So
like what's the main plot we're following because all of our stories are a bit different.
Yeah.
I like the I like the basically he goes on this trip to uh, we get sleepytosis. His son uh, dies from sleepytosis, and he goes on this trip to just like escape it all. It's just very escapist. And on that trip, maybe he unknowingly goes through the Bermuda Triangle, or he basically we just see his ship going through some sort of portal. And it's not very clear, or maybe there's like a storm and he washes up someplace. And so it's just very vague on where he ends up. And that can be how we get to that island with the villagers.
Uh, yeah. I love the idea of the son being afflicted by sleepytosis, and that's the catalyst for him going on the journey. So how clear should we be about whether or not the villagers are? Is it Oompa Loompas or is it just people.
I like them being Oompa Loompa. Like I like them like having different forms. So like they look like people at first, but like once he gets the drugs in him,
Yes,
there's
100%.
like
I'm
it's
the
super
same way.
ambiguous that they're aliens, but
Yes,
they're totally aliens.
Yeah, I
it's
was
yeah,
thinking with the alien thing that it's kind of like just the stuff you see in the background, like maybe the shapes of their homes and whatnot. It kind of looks like ships, but they're overgrown with vines and they're aged and maybe kind of rusted. But the general shape is like, hold on, that looks like a flying saucer.
yeah. And I think we can. So if you the whole ancient aliens like crystal skull technology, just that these people on this isolated island have technology far beyond the means of what they should be capable of, let alone what we are now capable of. I think that would maybe imply they're aliens without us having to directly come out and say it. And then
Yeah.
during the ayahuasca scenes, we could definitely see some alien forms.
I do
Um,
like the idea of none of those things even being present until he's on the drugs, until he's gone on the trip. That maybe before that everything looks very not mundane, but what typical of what you would expect on of an like an island tribe.
Yeah, I like something towards the end where like they put this like weird plant and he drinks it and like it's kind of assumed like oh that's why he's seeing all this stuff, but then like maybe Mr. Wilkinson's like eating it and Willie's like no Mr. Wilkinson don't make you crazy. He's like I've been eating this for days. What are you talking about? And he's like dun 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 like oh shit it was all real no.
so yeah, I think we should have him take it very early on as almost like um, they give it to him almost as like a remedy or something because he seems ill when he first washes up on the island, and so almost his entire time on the island is in this state of if you ever see. I know Nick, you've seen the movie Midsummer. We went and saw it together. Nick, Storm, if you've seen the movie Midsummer, where it's
Yeah,
like the shrooms and you're not really sure um, what is real and what's not.
totally.
Yeah, and it's this like state of everything's just a little hazy. Um, so
Oh yeah,
let's
I'd like
let's
that.
start from let's start
What's
from the
that?
top. Okay,
Oh
go
sorry,
ahead.
I was gonna say that was it A24 the production company.
Oh, I
Yeah.
would love them to pick up
Yeah,
this
one of them
movie.
for
That would
sure.
be
Oh my
perfect. Like
god.
yeah. So I think we start with Willy Wonka, the famed chocolatier who has like been talked about in Nobel Prize conversations, is a well-known chemist. We definitely have this. We can even track it maybe through like pictures in a montage in our opening credits, or even like pictures on his office wall in our opening credits that imply all of this. And we cut to Willy Wonka and his son walking through a much less like Wonka version of the factory. Um, and we see that bond between father and son, and they're talking about these little men that, yeah. So we could that poem could even be tied into like the son, or he tells it to the son, um, and then it would obviously come back later. How do you guys feel like?
I like the idea of him writing the poem when he comes back, and it's just
Okay,
this like this piece that's going around through town. Like, I mean, if the Oompa Loompas are aliens, maybe he doesn't have that. Like, maybe he has like an imagination, like or imaginative relationship with his son, where they vaguely talk about these Oompa Loompas, but maybe they're not described exactly as he sees them. But like he combines his experience with the aliens
Oh,
and the stories and the songs and the stories with his sons to create what
yeah.
is the modern chocolate factory.
I like that a lot. That it's already been it already exists, like in their imagination, in their conversations, but we don't see it. We just hear them talking about it in much vaguer, broader terms. I like the idea of the poem maybe coming from that. Those interactions with him and his son before the journey even happens. So then it leaves it kind of up to audience interpretation on whether or not what he's seeing is the realized fantasy world that he created with his son that he's playing out because he's guilt ridden and he's on this drug trip, or is it real and are they aliens?
Dude, I swear this would actually be a really good scary movie.
Yeah,
It's a cool idea. Yeah.
it would be, yeah, like a not even scary movie, just like a intense thriller, where like yeah, I agree. Um,
Yeah. Oh, by the way, one of the things hanging up on his wall needs to be a chocolate high degree.
yeah,
Yeah.
like a chocolate high class of 55 or whatever
And all their
year.
faces are covered in
Um,
chocolate.
yeah. Um, so we have them. We have to then get into the sleepytosis, where maybe we could just like splash some newspaper headlines up as like pandemic rocks, um, whatever country they're in, Germany,
Yeah,
Britain.
I don't know. It's clearly like a German village, at least some sort of European village. I like the idea of like when someone yawns, like it's not like it's like a big deal now. It's like, oh,
Yeah.
like are you okay? Like, no, mom, I'm just tired. Like,
There's a
So
lot
it could
of
be
little vignettes for the first half of Willy Wonka, the original one, that are like these totally unconnected scenes that kind of build out the sensational energy, like this kind of like anxious energy that people are feeling. It sets the tone of the whole world. So we could have maybe a similar sequence that's a couple of vignettes where with things exactly like you said, Nick, with yawning, and then everyone freaks out, and then or maybe just someone trying to wake somebody up, and they won't wake up. I don't know exactly what that would be, but a similar montage to set that
so I
pandemic
feel like
mindset.
we could have some workers at like the Wonka factory. We have a guy who's like sleeping in a chair, and
Hmm.
somebody tries to shake him awake, and he just doesn't wake up.
Yeah,
And then we maybe splash some newspaper headlines of like this is this thing, and then we see a scene of like a factory worker yawn, and everybody freaks out and like reports them, and they like get thrown out. Um, and then maybe we see something that would imply that Willy Wonka's son has contracted it, and he freaks out and fires everybody. Like he tells everybody they have to get out because he blames the factory workers for his son contracting sleepytosis, um, and and so that's kind of how the factory shuts down. Uh, and it would have went into this complete tailspin if his son wouldn't have died, and he went on this trip where he ultimately reopens the factory because of it.
yeah, that's good. I like the idea of yeah, that being his his son falling into the sleepytosis coma being the catalyst for him shutting down the factory. I think it would be cool if that's set against the backdrop of he knows that there are people, spying on his techniques and whatnot. So it's already a tense environment. Then there's this sleepytosis pandemic, and then it's in the factory, and then it's affecting his family. So that's all these factors leading up to him finally snapping and closing it down. So that's a big emotional kind of changing, like turning of the tides first act or midpoint of the movie moment.
And
Oh
so
yeah.
I think the major decision we have to make then is, do we want his son to die from sleepytosis immediately, or do we want the journey to be to get this magical like cure?
Well, I mean, him. The reason why I left his son alive is to make it like kind of like a breaking point for Willy Wonka while he's on that like crazy experience. I mean, he could die beforehand or not; it doesn't really matter.
I think it is that is a fantastic catalyst for him to want to go on this trip to discover a like a cure. So I think we should keep him alive, and then Nick, what you just said, this idea of him being told the bad news at a peak point later in the movie where he's already maybe taken the drugs. Then he finds out that his son has died, and that leads him into the depths of the trip.
Well, I want the like I think maybe he should just die before like
Okay.
any of that.
I want to pitch an alternative of the son dying early, and we'll see which one we like better.
Okay.
So in the version where the son dies early on, I think we see um, he contracts it, he fires everybody, or maybe he doesn't fire everybody. The son ultimately dies, he fires everybody, and then we see Willy Wonka walking aimlessly through his own factory, clearly talking like he's talking to a young boy, talking about the same stories, and we see Wilkinson like up in a factory window seeing it, and he like grabs him and he's like, you have to get out of here, you have to get out of this place. The memory Wally is all over here. We got to go. We got to get out of here. We have to escape this.
Yeah,
So
that
like
makes
that's if we want the kid to die early, I think that's how we do it.
it is. It would be a very impactful kind of turning the page sort of moment on a beginning of the journey from the Willy Wonka that he is, like this father son relationship, to becoming, I guess, closer to the Willy Wonka that he is in the original movie. Although that is kind of up in the air given the insanity angle that we're coming from here.
Maybe when his son dies, he can go on a rampage in his office and just start cutting things in half.
Yes. Oh, that's good.
just like he's like, my better half is gone, and he
Oh,
just he just
I
smashes
love
everything.
that.
I this is kind of derailing it a little bit, but I had this another dark thought that when Willy Wonka was writing something when like was like, good day, sir. He was like
Yeah.
writing something on a piece of paper. My theory was that he was writing a suicide note.
Oh no.
He's just like, well, I can't find an heir. Like it's over. Like there's nothing left. It's like even when he, like even when they're in the glass elevator, he's like, there's not much else left for me, Charlie. Like can't carry on my own too much longer.
Yeah. Okay. Oh man, that's dark, and I understand why you went the direction that you did with that observation. He also tells Charlie that he's specifically hiring a kid so that they'll do it his way, because an adult would maybe implement their own ideas, and he
Yeah,
doesn't want that. He wants to be able to control, even from the grave or from retirement, the decisions that are
yeah,
happening.
it's kind of messed up.
Yeah, he's a complicated guy.
So what do we want to do? Do we want his son to die, or do we want to save that for later?
Yeah, let's
He
just have him
dies.
die.
Yeah, kill him. Let's kill him.
Okay.
Kill him, and
And
then he goes.
we
on
can
a
have
journey.
the scene where he cuts everything in half. We can have the scene where Wilkinson sees him. We kind of see a glimpse of the madness that will be, with him wandering through an empty factory, and
Yeah.
then they go on this trip.
Yeah, I like the idea of like prefacing like you are my best half, son. Like they have to lead up to that for the cutting.
Yeah, and I think even we could tie the trip into the stories. Basically, like his son on top of the fantastical stories, like was really an adventurer and wanted to go to these far off places, and so it is almost like an homage, like a send off to his son. Maybe he's taking his son's ashes to spread them somewhere. Oh my
Wow.
God, that's what it's got to be, right?
Wow. Yeah, that's powerful.
Instead of a cure, he's spreading his son's ashes somewhere.
Yeah, I did not intend on that coming out of my mouth, but I feel like that's what has to happen, right? Because
Yeah,
that gives him
I can get
reason.
behind that.
That gives him reason for going out of the country on boat.
His last wish is like, find me the island of Oompa Loompa Land that we made up in our fantasies, Daddy. I know it's real. Find it and spread my ashes off of its
Oh,
tallest
no.
mountain.
Or he's going on this voyage to find the closest thing to Oompa Loompa Land to spread his son's ashes, and it is this like Moby Dick, like he's not. It is a white whale he's not going to find because it's obviously not real. But it is now his journey until he gets into shipwrecked and washes up on this island.
Yeah, with
Wow.
these aliens that somehow get into his mind and blend this Oompa Loompa Land stories, like kind of vaguely in the background with their like horrific stuff. I don't know. I like that idea of like somehow they.
I like the idea a lot of them being regular villagers, and then over the course of how he's there longer, they assimilate to the Oompa Loompas in his mind's eye, and basically it is because they have the ability to like read his thoughts
Oh.
and change into what he is looking for.
Yeah, like maybe like if you ever read Childhood's End, I know Storm has, but like almost like a hive mind, but they need like a human's mind to kind of like meld with in order to be a permanent like existence on the planet. I don't know how
Nice.
this would at all be explained in the movie. Probably wouldn't be explicitly, but like that could be what it can leads into. So they're like just kind of absorbing his mind, which is like super messed up because his child just died and he has all these weird fantasies and he's like a creative dude. And so like they create this world and then they're like somehow meld with him and turn into Oompa Loompas.
So to go to the hive mind, and to really make this A24 wheelhouse, I think we should have some scene of like extreme grief where I believe it was in Midsummer where like all the women are yelling during the childbirth, and it's just super creepy. Do you guys know what I'm talking about?
Yeah,
That
yeah,
specific
definitely.
scene where they're like all moaning with her.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, I think we could have the Oompa Loompas because they're that hive mind. When he's going through grief about his son, they too are just like, oh, and it's just like all of these people, and maybe for Wilkinson, it's the horror movie.
What if
Yeah.
what if for that scene he's surrounded by all these aliens, and he keeps mistaking each one of them for his son. Like they
Oh
keep
man.
like turning into
Yes.
his son. He's like, oh, like Wally Wonka, no. And then like I know it's just this weird like scenario where like then they turn into like an alien, and then he's like, oh, then he sees his son behind him, and he runs back.
That's an awesome idea. All of these are fantastic ideas. I think with the tribe that they encounter, this kind of pulling from my pitch a little bit. It would be interesting if somehow someone explains to them that these people are like very in touch with their emotions, so they can sense that he's grieving, and they kind of pressure him to work through what's going on through these rituals where they're all, like they want to scream and cry with him, but they also maybe so Nick, you mentioned the hive mind or the overmind from Childhood's End. There's this other sci-fi idea that I kind of thought about. Some comic book that I read years ago, the Marvel Asgardians, they kind of confess that they don't have an actual physical form. It doesn't exist naturally. What they are is whoever sees them, whatever they believe in or decide they are, they become that form. So maybe that kind of informs the alien background of the Oompa Loompas, although I think that should remain incredibly vague.
Oh yeah,
Um, and there should be definitely a lot of realistic grounding of them as a tribal culture. So then the alien stuff, as it creeps in, is more of that psychedelic horror. Is he
So
insane?
I
Uh,
think what we could do there is when they wash up on the island, Willy Wonka is passed out, and Wilkinson sees them first, and he assumes that they're tribes people, and so for the longest time they are tribes people until they kind of figure out that Wonka is the brains of the operation, and then they start to meld into what he would rather them be.
nice. Yeah,
And that's where we can see that morph coming.
I like that.
no, that's nice. I want a scene where they sing, where like he sings this like without music, but this really disgruntled pure imagination song.
Oh,
Like I don't know, it's in the background. Like maybe like early on, like it's a song he makes up with his kid, and like they sing it together. So like maybe during that big freak out scene or that pit, pivotal climax, like you hear the song of him and his son singing.
oh
In
man.
a world of pure imagination,
Oh,
like it's like it's
do
a father and son.
you guys know the movie There Will Be Blood?
Oh
Yeah.
yeah,
There's a part in that movie where the preacher character Eli makes Daniel Plainview he's makes him say that he abandoned his boy, and he makes him start screaming it. I like the idea of Willy Wonka kind of screaming with that same energy the words to that
Mm-hmm.
song in this scene where they're the Oompa Loompas are all joining in with him with that that totally unhinged
oh yeah.
grief rage energy.
If you want to view paradise, simply look around and
Yeah.
view it.
Yep.
Anything
Uh,
you
Just
want
scream.
to do it. Want to change the world? There's nothing to it.
I also like the idea of the Oompa Loompas, the first human language we hear from them being like in chorus,
Oh yeah.
singing that song to Willy Wonka when he's never sang it to them.
Yeah, that,
Right.
that
And
that's the way
that's
we can
maybe how
like.
we reveal.
Yeah, that they're like kind of connected to him somehow,
Yeah.
and like they're starting to become one with Willy Wonka. I do like the idea that Willy Wonka and the Oompa Loompas are like one interconnected being, and Willy Wonka, the chocolate factory.
They've
Like
been
it's like
bound. Their minds have melded.
And then, I mean, you can get real deep into the lore where, like, not only is he trying to find a new heir, but his mind is like losing its power and its strength. So they really, this alien species needs a new, fresh child mind to
Oh, that's
like.
good. Yeah, because then, and that's why he wants a kid, because the kid will believe in them the same way he believes in them. It will keep the same form. The factory will look the same way. Where like an adult, that they might bring in stories of their own, or they might have doubts about the sincerity. Everyone's doubting when he mentions Lupaland and the different creatures and whatnot. People, the adults don't believe him, but Charlie would believe it, and so
Yeah.
a kid's got to meld with them to keep the story consistent.
Oh man, I legit want this movie to be made.
Yeah, this is cool.
Like, I mean, obviously it never would, but oh, I mean, imagine how horrifying a playoff of a famous kids movie would be like
Yes,
this.
yeah. Like I don't know. I was also thinking that the rights of Willy Wonka or Charlie and the Chocolate Factory must be rather tight, because I think it's pretty crazy that nobody's tried to create just a candy brand. Um,
There's stuff you can get. It's definitely like a subsidiary of either Nestle or Hershey, but you
is
can
it?
get Wonka bars.
But it's not nearly as popular as you would. I mean, I guess it's because the
No,
movie
yeah, it's
existed
probably
so
a
long ago.
novelty.
But
Well,
um,
I've thought about this, and like, have you see like Wonka candy branding? It's like horrible. Like I don't know, when you see that in Bill's Candy Shop in that movie, just this giant chocolate bar, and it just says Wonka on it with a purple wrapper. Like, there's something about that simplicity that just, I want some fucking chocolate right now, man. Like, I
Well,
don't know.
if I'm not mistaken, so there was a Red Letter Media did a review of Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory a few months back. It might even be longer than that at this point, but
Really?
they mentioned that the movie came to development as a candy promotional tie-in. So somebody was planning to do this Willy Wonka, the Wonka bars, but that part failed horribly, where the movie stood the test of time.
Oh, that's
hmm.
interesting.
So how are we going to end this movie?
Yeah.
So we have Willy Wonka, we have the Oompa Loompas. Do we have them just sailing on a ship and the sun
No.
sets over the ship and we know the rest? Or do we have them going back and implementing the factory? Or
I think if you put enough breadcrumbs towards the original movie, the audience will be able to put together, oh, this came from here, this was influenced by here. Oh, here's an image of one of the villagers chopping a chicken's head cut off. That was in the tunnel
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
the tunnel ride for the boat.
Mhm.
But so I like the idea of like him like having this like insane revelation with these aliens. They have like the final blend, and it kind of goes to white, and then we like I said, I really like that end scene. I not to go back to I'm happy with this end scene of him, his back, Willy Wonka's back, with his cane, walking all slow towards a cheering crowd at the gates of his factory, and then him just falling over, and then like a big like Inception, like Wonka.
Nick, are you talking
Yeah.
about kind of like a tracking shot where it's following him through the doors? He's framed up facing the crowd, and it follows him, that while he's hobbling the
Yeah,
whole way,
his
and then he
back's facing
falls.
the camera.
I think that's really good.
I like that too.
That would
And we
move
just
me if I
slowly
saw it.
build the roar of the crowd.
Yeah.
Um,
Oh, dude,
to
I want this movie to be made so bad.
So I think the best ending is we imply so Willy Wonka has to go home. He basically tells them I've got to go back, um, and I don't know if the ship is destroyed and we want to have an Oompa Loompa ship or something, but they come with him. We make it very clear that they're coming with him. We just see them kind of sailing off. Cut to X years later, and then we just see that tracking shot of Willy Wonka, and then we end the movie.
I can get behind that.
Yeah, that's fine.
And then we kind of know we fill in the gap of they came back. Obviously, like maybe we could drop a hint in there that the Oompa Loompas are very. I guess maybe it's because they have that hive mind mentality with Willy Wonka that they can just act as he would act as far as creation goes, and that's why they're able to produce so many variations seamlessly. Um, but we could maybe drop in that they're also very good at cooking or creating food or something.
Oh, and can we like they communicate through like music because he always like does his little flute
Yeah.
to like
Yeah.
like that's actually how they talk.
Uh-huh. Or at least there are, maybe they, their communication is it is not as straightforward as like humans where we talk mostly, but it's a variety. They can express full sentiments through a little lick like that. They do or like in song when they wrap up, something's happened and they want to tell you all about a little the lesson that everyone should take away. Um I think
I
that's cool.
Yeah, I really like this idea that the Oompa Loompas are just this mesh between these aliens that have blended with Willy Wonka's mind. That a, a psychotic breakdown turns him into the new Willy Wonka who dresses
And
crazy.
so maybe the ayahuasca is not necessarily ayahuasca, but it is some liquid that is it is
Well,
what is
I thought
responsible
that
for
the idea
creating
was
that
that he
gnome.
wasn't drinking ayahuasca.
I'm saying that they have to have an end. It could be that he's drinking this liquid that is like for lack of a better word, like nectar from their queen that allows him to become the leader of the hive mind.
Oh
Does that
boy.
make sense? It is they have been feeding him this thing that is allowing him to be apt to them taking on elements of his mind.
Yeah, as long as it's not like explicitly said, but that can be like something that like
Yeah, and it
clearly
could
as he drinks more and they feed him more throughout the trip,
the
he
more he
works
has,
it.
the stronger his bond between them comes.
But then
But we
that
don't
gets
make
rid
it
of the
necessarily clear that
Wilkinson. It gets rid of the Wilkinson reveal if he comes or someone else shows up and then they eat it and they're like nothing's
Well,
happening.
okay. Well, let's say Wilkinson is kind of this real grounded guy who cares a lot about Willy Wonka. He's been there the whole time, and he is kind of going along with it. Um, um, just because he sees the positive benefits this is having in his friend's psyche. Or are you saying that he's not like there at all, or he shouldn't be there at all?
No, I was thinking like I don't know. I just like that surprise of like you don't know like oh wait he thought that he was on a hallucinogenic drug but actually there's something deeper crazier going on here like where like oh someone else eats it and nothing happens to him so it's not actually affecting it but that I mean that was just a thing we mentioned earlier it doesn't have to be in there.
what
Oh, I
if
see.
so this is a very big twist, so it immediately shut me down if you don't like this. What if we see after they get back a thing with the office that is something that indicates that Wilkinson died a very long time ago, and much like the memory of his son, he's been carrying the memory of his best friend Wilkinson everywhere, and so we find out that Wilkinson too was not
Okay.
actually a
Okay.
real person. Is that way
So
too off the rails?
I do like just these crazy reveals. I don't think it's too far off the rails given what we're establishing, but I want to draw attention to the fact that means one of these creatures is out there in the world in Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory in the original, and he's interacting with these kids. Having he's taken on this Wilkinson form, but he's out
As
there in
Wilkinson, yeah.
society. That's scary.
Yeah, I don't know. I like the idea that they can't even like escape the factory though. Like they're like limited to like I mean, and this is just getting into nitty gritty weird details, but maybe Wilkinson would have to somehow be something different than the aliens. I feel
We
like.
could have, oh my gosh, we could have a terrible reveal right at the very like right the scene right before he walks out that is Wilkinson, the candy shop owner, the guy with the cart that says the little poem. All of these people shift back into an Oompa Loompa. Um, and we reveal that all of these people have been plants by Willy Wonka to drive Charlie. Um,
Yeah. Okay, I can get behind that because that ties in an idea we had. So it was in someone's pitch about all of the kids in the original movie, it being set up, that it's a controlled environment, that it isn't by chance that they're getting the golden tickets. And it's it's the Oompa Loompas are out there making sure that happens.
That in a full length movie might be a lot to stuff in there, but there's a lot of good things to play with at the very least. All right.
It's just implied. It could just be implied, like the scene, like Zach said about you see the characters and you just see them turn back into the Oompa Loompas for a second. Kind of some quick cuts.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. So I think that wraps up the movie. I think we got.
Yeah.
I don't know how we did it, but I think we made like an acceptable but also horrific Willy Wonka. Let's get into casting.
Totally.
And I know, like, I don't necessarily know. Do we have anybody that we need to cast in this role besides just Willy Wonka?
Yeah, I do have an idea for one side character, and I'm glad that we developed Wilkinson as this guy that was going to be there the whole time, because in my mind, it was going to be like Slugworth, but I do have like a Willy Wonka and then a second guy cast. So I'll say it's Wilkinson.
Okay.
Yeah, we can work with those
so
two.
let's start with Wilkinson then. So who are we thinking for like a Wilkinson that will be with him throughout the movie?
I was thinking Bill Skarsgård, the guy who played Pennywise in It. He was recently in a movie on Netflix called The Devil All the Time, and he was in Deadpool 2. He's a very ranged guy, but I think he's kind of got those vibes. The Wilkinson guy in the original movie looked really German, and he kind of had an accent as well, and I could see Bill Skarsgård in those glasses.
So for mine, I was thinking Rainn Wilson.
Nice.
But I don't know. I think he might be like it's definitely got to be a shaved up Rainn Wilson because he's usually rocking a beard nowadays. But like I want him looking as Dwight Schrute as possible. But like Eastern European Dwight Schrute.
I can dig it. I like that the Dwight Schrute connection, because I thought that the Wilkinson guy in the original looked a little bit like David Wallace from The Office.
I mean, for this movie, I think I would like the Bill Skarsgård just because of the horror movie.
Yeah, I think
experience.
I like him better.
Yeah. All right, I like that. I didn't really think of anybody for Wilkinson. I don't know why. I really just kind of thought of Willy Wonka, to be honest with you.
I'm pretty
who did you
interested.
come up with? I have no idea. Like I'm all over the board with Willy Wonka.
Sorry, I keep cutting you off, Nick. I went with kind of like trying to go with Gene Wilder vibes, but you went with like a totally different approach, correct?
Yeah. Well, also I had this style of movie in mind, so
Okay.
I chose Adam Driver.
Whoa.
Like I just feel like a movie where someone can like I feel like one, he can show like a good emotional range, like especially the build up with like him loving his son. Like I think he'd be great for something like that. And like we won't really need to show Gene Wilder Willy Wonka in this. We just need to show Willy Wonka going batshit crazy, and I think he'd do a good intermediary for that.
I think Adam Driver is excellent at playing like maybe crazy, where he can just deadpan say a line completely emotionless, and you wonder like, is this guy about to end it all? Yeah, I think Adam Driver is a very interesting choice for this movie.
Yeah, Adam Driver has like a crazy calm, this calm to him. Where the scene that we kind of developed with him having the emotional breakdown with the Oompa Loompas where he's screaming, I can already see Adam Driver doing that in an extremely intense way.
Yeah, I feel like I've seen him do that in a movie.
Yeah. Have you seen Marriage Story?
I have not seen Marriage Story yet.
Okay, he has some yelling in that movie that would be reminiscent.
Okay.
Okay, so I went with the idea of trying to replicate that Gene Wilder vibe. He's very, very, very calm, kind of sarcastic. There's a specific physicality and relaxed vibe to him, and also his eyes are really pale blue in kind of a striking way. And so my first choice was Ryan Gosling, who I think kind of has a similar. He's more straightforward, just like handsome guy, but some similar energy. And I actually found an article that there was a Willy Wonka project in development at one point, and Ryan Gosling was one of the guys up for the role. The other two being Donald Glover, Childish Gambino, and then Ezra Miller, who I think would be way too close to the Johnny Depp version. But okay, so my backup for Willy Wonka, or maybe actually probably even the guy that I think would fit closer into the movie we've developed, is Paul Dano. Do you guys know who Paul Dano is?
Yeah, no Paul Dano.
Yeah.
Hell yeah. I think he reminds me of Gene Wilder, with that kind of that calm, but very present, intelligent, wise attitude. But I know he can go there because of movies like There Will Be Blood.
Man, Paul Dano's good as well. I do like Ryan Gosling as like an actual Willy Wonka though.
I hate Ryan Gosling as Willy
Oh no.
Wonka. Like you said that, and I immediately was like, nope, don't like
Yeah.
that.
Well, that's why. See, he came to mind as like if you were doing a straightforward impression, like a copy of Gene Wilder, but it's like you can't. That doesn't even make sense. That's not a good move. You want to embody the same vibe, but somebody who's going to bring their own thing to it. So I think after kind of marinating on those two guys for a few days, I would lean more towards Paul Dano.
I like Paul Dano a lot, but I'm going to throw out Robert Pattinson. I know we've talked about him before.
Nice.
But I think he would be an interesting choice to take it like in that trippy area.
Man,
Yeah.
those are all three good choices.
Yeah. Robert Pattinson, that reminds, I feel like him and Adam Driver kind of sit in a similar box, if you will. Like if we were casting it, I could see both of them being guys that were up for the role.
But is the thing with Paul Dano is like, how would he do with like a father-son relationship?
Yeah. Well, I mean,
well,
I don't know. I haven't seen a movie. I don't think I've seen a film where he plays a father, but I have seen what's that movie, Love and Mercy, where he plays Brian Wilson of the Beach Boys. And there's some relationships he has with people that are a little bit more paternal, a little bit more kind of, I guess, calm and caring and thoughtful, as opposed to totally unhinged and manipulative or skeevy.
all right. I say we go with Paul Dano just because I feel like it adds. I mean, he's just. I mean, I just keep thinking of him from There Will Be Blood, and he just.
Oh, did you guys see Swiss Army Man?
No, I haven't seen that.
Okay, I don't think I've ever seen the whole thing, but there's definitely vibes in that go right along with our plot of what's real and what isn't. A guy tripping out on a desert island.
I also like Paul Dano because I think that he gives a vulnerability, like physically, just seems a lot more vulnerable than Robert Pattinson or Adam Driver.
Yeah,
he just doesn't seem as like physically imposing as the other two.
Yeah, and there's just something scarier about him. I feel like Adam Driver might be too likable, and Robert Pattinson. I mean, they could play it off obviously to not be likable, but like, I don't know. There's something about Paul Dano's face that you're just like, man, this guy. I don't know. Maybe that's just.
No, I agree. No, absolutely. That he kind of jumps off the screen. I don't know. I feel like I've seen Paul Dano play a lot of different roles, but there's always something there that's like, oh yeah, this guy. What's he about to do?
Yeah, this guy sums Paul Dano up. That guy.
So what are we thinking of a title for this piece?
My pitch originally was just under the title Wonka.
Yeah, I was going to go with Wonka as well.
Okay, there might be something more.
I like the simplicity. I was thinking, just as we were writing this, like Willy Wonka and the Land of the Loompas, but that might be a little too wordy. I think Wonka is way cleaner.
Well,
and
A24 is producing it, and you got to get that single, short, brief.
I agree. We've had a lot of a lot of colon work in our titles so far. So I think simplifying would be good for this one. So we're just going Wonka.
Yeah, it fits that scary movie trend of just like one word.
Yeah, I like it.
Man, I feel like I can see the poster now, like the back of his head with the hat, and then just the big letters where you're not sure what the tone is. Just Wonka.
Oh yeah, I'm very much looking forward to making this. this poster.
Yeah, I'm very interested in what you're gonna do with it because, yeah, I really like this movie idea.
Yeah, I know. Like
Yeah.
this is the one time I'm like, actually, please make this movie. I want this movie to
Yeah.
be made.
So that brings us to the end. Please make this movie.
Please make this movie.
Please make this sci-fi horror Willy Wonka prequel.
Specifically A24.
Yes, please and thank you.
Bye.